One thing you'll come to see in life is your values aren't even constant. Our core values are, right? So what's right or wrong to me has remained constant in my life. But the way I approach all of those changes as you age, as you gain more experience in life, as you define your sense of self. You don't really get to know yourself well until your mid 30s, as you kind of divorce your societal values to some extent and kind of start to think more deeply about who am I? How do I relate to the world? How do I relate to myself? What are my beliefs? What do I truly value despite what has been taught to me?
Welcome to Normalize the Conversation. I'm your host, Francesca Regader. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Shahrzad Jalali, a licensed clinical psychologist who blends depth-oriented therapy, somatic healing, and Jungian psychology to help people transform trauma into self-discovery and resilience. What if the emotions you feel right now aren't the full story of who you are? In this conversation, Dr. Jalali reminds us that feelings, both the highs and the lows, are always moving, never permanent. When we stop over-identifying with them, we can see ourselves with more compassion and less judgment. Discover how shifting your perspective might just change the way you see yourself. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am very excited for our conversation, but before we begin, I just want to check in. How were you really?
That's a great question. I ask that question a lot from people given what I do, but other than the times I am in therapy, no one ever asks me that. Thank you for asking. I am actually very anxious. I have a book coming out very soon, and I am in that, kind of right before, um, I would say, time frame where it just feels like, why did I do this to myself? And I'm trying to wrap my head around it, in addition to the million other things I do on a daily basis. But at the same time, the other side of anxiety is excitement to some extent. So I think there's some excitement there, but a lot of feeling overwhelmed and catching up.
Yeah, oh my goodness, I totally relate to that. And first of all, it's so scary when you put so much time and effort in your heart into something, and then it's like, how is it going to be received? And for me, I get so anxious, and then I'm so excited about it, and just so anxious on the response, and always having to remind myself that at the end of the day, I put everything I had into it, and I'm proud of it. And if one person like gets it and it helps them, then I did exactly what I set out to do.
That's a great way to look at it. We're relational beings, therefore our brains are wired for connection. And connection, we perceive it as validity a lot of times, right? So if you get the sense that I like you, you feel connected to me, and that feels good to you. But if you feel the sense that there's discord on my side, then you feel rejected and you go into this feeling of panic that we were just talking about, right? So, and I guess inherently we're just programmed that way. And I think it's important to bring attention to that as all of us go through life and feel these feelings and feel uncomfortable with them and kind of go down the rabbit hole by thinking, well, I don't have confidence, or why am I thinking these thoughts? So what if other people don't like me? It's just very much inherent in our nervous system to feel this way.
It really is. And I was talking about this with one of my friends last night because we both constantly have this idea in our mind that everyone hates us and that people are going to think we're mean. And we genuinely love connection and we love deep conversations. And then there's all this like worry and concern toward how do people perceive me? And I know for me, can't speak for her, but for me, there was a lot of worry that if I'm me and people see all sides of me, then maybe they won't feel as connected to me and then they won't like me. And then my self-worth goes down because I'm constantly questioning, am I good enough? Is who I am someone people are going to accept or reject. And especially with talking about mental health all the time, there's so much fear because of the stigma. Like, how are people going to react to it? And I love talking about it. And then I'm like, maybe I have to dial myself down. And there's just all these thoughts in my head that constantly make me go,
No, I hear you. And anytime you're talking about any topic that can have the potential of triggering people, I guess you're at the receiving end of people's reactions, right? But I think anything worth saying kind of rises up emotions in people. The thing with emotions is it can go either way. People can love what you're saying or they can hate what you're saying. I think part of the problem in our society right now is, especially in the new generation, and I'm very curious, I wish someone would start doing some research on this, is that if you are saying something that doesn't align with my value system, then you are bad and I am good.
yes, that is a big thing right now. And I'm at the older end of Gen Z, so I get some of that. And I see it with my younger cousins all the time, this idea that we all have to have the same value system. And values are very, very complex and they differ a lot from your personal experiences and your perspective and worldview. And especially in a younger generation where your entire exposure is your local community and your family members, a lot of times people are very, very similar to you. That's in your inner circle. So I know
Mhm.
for me, I didn't develop my own value system that I understood until I went to college. And for the first time, I wasn't constantly with my family in that same small group. So it's so hard when you assume that if the values don't align, everyone else is bad. And then it forms this disconnection before you've even had a chance to explore what your values really are and what they mean to you.
And one thing you'll come to see in life is your values aren't even constant. Our core values are, right? So maybe what's right or wrong to me has remained constant in my life, but the way I approach all of those changes as you age, as you gain more experience in life, as you define your sense of self in deeper layers, right? Even during your college years, you're very much consumed by academia, and academia has a particular air that you're exposed to, right? So I am a firm believer that you don't really get to know yourself well until almost midlife, or what Jung referred to as your mid 30s, around 30, 35, as you kind of divorce your societal values to some extent and kind of start to think more deeply about who am I? How do I relate to the world? How do I relate to myself? What are my beliefs? What do I truly value despite what has been taught to me?
Yeah, okay, so I've got ways to go. That's great. So exciting. It's a question that I ask myself a lot is who am I and what do I stand for? And am I always showing up that way? Because it's very easy to get caught up in what everyone else is doing and trying to fit in and this expected timeline of milestones. So I, for example, just turned 27 last week, and a
Happy
lot of
birthday.
my friends, thank you, a lot of my friends are in very different stages than I am. I graduated my master's in May. I have friends who've been in the workforce since 18, or they
Mhm.
graduated and finished college at 22, 23, and started working. So their careers look very different. They went more traditional corporate America. I went more entrepreneurship route and more creative route, which is totally fine. But a lot of times, my milestones feel so different than theirs. A bunch of my friends got engaged recently too, right?
Mhm.
Or buying homes. My younger brother's 23, engaged and bought a home. So seeing all of that comparison, my values and who I am and my sense of self and self worth are constantly tied up in this comparison game that even as I'm trying to explore, I still question every aspect of who I am because where am I supposed to be? And I guess there is no, people always say there's no real timeline. right? You get where you're meant to be as you go, and you never have to have things figured out. You just figure it out as you go. Yet, still, I guess in my now late 20s, it's so hard to fully accept that.
Yes, as much as I do agree with what you're saying, that there is no actual timeline, and the older you get, the more evident this becomes, or even if there is, it doesn't really mean anything essentially. However, there is a silent one in society that has been defined, right? So if you're in your mid 20s, for example, and you meet someone new, the first question they ask you is, so you're in school? Because that's what you're expected to be doing during that time, right? Or if you're in your 40s, when you meet people, the first thing they ask you, how many kids do you have? Because you're meant to have had kids by that time, right? So society does assign these values to us. And I think it's very important to be very tactful about how we relate to them, because we don't know people's stories, and we don't know their life challenges. And we try to categorize them in those boxes. We even go further out and we say, "Oh, how come?" If someone says, "I don't have any kids," or "I didn't go to school," as if, why are you not abiding by the norm, right? And we don't realize that even though it seems like an innocent comment or question, it can really scar someone who's struggling with that concept.
Yes, exactly. There is that silent timeline expectations of these milestones. And we love to ask questions that lead to a lot of assumptions. And I know that's one thing with me with holidays is always so hard because my family loves to ask all the fun questions of, are you dating anyone? Why aren't you dating anyone? Why don't you have a traditional job or a real job?
Mhm.
And there's all these questions all the time that I'm like, I feel like I have to maybe justify myself and try to rationalize why I'm not at society's like expected milestone piece yet. And then you get the comments a lot of times, or I get the comments of, well, how's your friend doing? I heard your friend just did this. So it's like already comparing you up against what these other people are doing that are hitting some of those expected milestones at that age.
That's very true. And that's why I want to bring some awareness to this, that all of this comes from the fact that our value system in society is very much performance based, right? So if you do this, or if you have this, then you're valued. And if you don't, then you're not, right? Now, we've tried to correct that over the years by, for example, at one point it was very important if you were first place or second place in a match or in any kind of competition. Now, I notice when I watch things or when I talk to people that they're placing less and less value on that in many ways. However, I don't think these things will actually correct these kind of mindsets. This is rooted in the fact that we believe humans have value if they perform. And if they don't, then they are not valuable. Whereas as a human being, our true value is inherent in just being. And
Yes.
if we can shift this, I think a lot of our pains and aches and wounds will potentially, come to be shaped in a different way, because a lot of us struggle, whether we're aware or not, struggle with this phenomena that, do I actually have value, and am I good enough? And we continue to struggle with that in every aspect of our life, our work, our relationships, our sense of self, which doesn't help society overall when you think about it.
It does not. And at least I know for me, it creates this complex in my sense of identity, in that sense of self, where, like last week, for example, leading up to my birthday, going from mid 20s to late 20s, which doesn't seem like a big transition, yet it felt like a huge transition because all these expectations come along with it. I called my parents 4 days in a row just in tears. I was like, what's wrong with me? Why am I not good enough? I feel like I'm failing at life. I'm so behind. And just all of this insecurity pouring out. And I feel so bad for my parents. If you guys are listening, I'm so sorry you went through that with me for 4 days straight. Thanks for bearing with me. But it's so difficult when you are trying to figure out your values, you're trying to figure out your sense of self, and there's so many lessons that were taught to you at an early age, like that performance equals how much value you have in school. Learning, you can fail at learning, right?
Yeah.
Or you get asked a question randomly in class and you don't get the answer right. And then the teacher sometimes corrects you in maybe not the nicest way, or
Mhm.
people may laugh at you, right? There's all these expectations just at a young age. You're taught to perform well. And if you perform well and you get straight A's, you get an award in front of the school, right? You get like dean's list or principal's list. If you don't get in trouble at all in school and you're very quiet and reserved instead of very talkative and animated, then maybe you get more like perks. Like we had treasure chests in
Yes.
elementary school, right? So you're rewarded for how you are showing up and how you're performing instead of for just being and showing up and doing your best.
Yeah.
It,
No, I hear you. It's tough, but I think this is why these things are important to talk about because once we bring consciousness to something, we can potentially approach it in a different way. We're not going to change societal norms overnight. There's reasons why they're there and why they have come to be shaped that way, but I think it's important to start at least questioning what we do to ourselves. I mean, we're all in charge of that, right?
we are, and a lot of times we don't realize that we do have control over that. For me, a big thing has been I have control over what content I receive and what messaging I'm allowing myself to receive. Because if I'm going online and following these accounts of people who maybe have a lot of fun luxuries where they're traveling the world all the time and they're buying all these expensive things and they have this perfect family, or that's what I'm seeing, the perception of it. And I'm seeing all this all the time. And then a lot of times I start questioning my self worth. And why can't my Instagram feed look like that? So I even have control over what content I'm consuming that's maybe making me question my identity and my worth and my value. Turning the TV on, I don't have to watch a show just because everyone else is watching it or read the book everyone else is watching. I have a lot more control just in that external piece I take in. And then I do struggling to learn it, but I do have some control over my thoughts. Or maybe the thought exists, but do I have to think on it? Do I have to allow it to take over my mind? There's a lot more control than we realize.
I agree with you. I think if we open up space, we can really realize how much power we have on this. And also, there's another layer to that, and I think it's to have the courage to be different, because I think we're all very shamed around that. I feel like if I don't fit into this norm, then there's something wrong with me. Whereas if you think about it, all the greatness in the world has come to be because someone didn't follow the herd necessarily. That's how change happens, right? So I think there's wisdom in both. Excuse me. Obviously, I think there's a lot of benefits in learning from people who have done something before you and following their wisdom. But at the same time, creativity is doing something different.
It is. And comparison really is the thief of joy. Trying to be someone else just takes away from who you are. And a lot of times it's easier to want to copy what other people are doing because it looks like it works, right? And it's the perception that we see this idea of can't, for me, it's like, can I be good enough if I am constantly comparing myself up against someone else, trying to emulate them and be them?
Yeah, after a while, you lose yourself when you try to do that, right? Because I think the joy of life is to truly identify your true self and dare enough to live your true self, as long as you're not hurting others or yourself for that matter. But most of us are so shamed around that, or we are so overtly concerned about how we'll be perceived by others and how we'll be judged by others that we don't ever allow ourselves to do that. And it really breaks my heart because as much as life feels difficult and it feels like it's never ending, we're all here for a very short period of time. So to think that we've never lived our true self, I think is the biggest failure of life.
Yeah, it really is. And it can be kind of scary to figure out who you are because a lot of times, I know for me, it starts with, oh my goodness, I don't know who I am. I have lost myself because I tied my identity into something very external. And when someone's validation or approval was taken away, right, that feeling of rejection, who am I? Or if my entire identity was being a student in school and suddenly my whole life isn't about learning a textbook to take a test, right, or
Mhm.
pass that exam, it becomes a lot of questions of now, where is my place in this world? So trying to explore your true self for me has been like this existential crisis a lot of, oh no, I genuinely don't know where I belong. And then it leads to what's wrong with me.
I don't know if this helps, but the in between from a psychological perspective is always a very interesting place to be in. It's right after something finishes and before the next phase begins. We tend to feel very lost, and it feels on a individual level very devastating to us because um, we start questioning our path, we start questioning ourselves. However, from a psychological perspective, when I'm sitting on the other side of this with a patient, I'm always secretly very excited because it's also the space in which a lot of greatness is born, right? um, because it's potentiated with a lot. You're about to embark on many different paths, many different discoveries. It's just not evident to you at the moment. So it feels very dark.
Yes, it does feel very dark. And I like that idea that it is exciting because you get to figure out who you are and where you fit in and what you're going to do and who you're going to be in this world. Like it does sound very exciting now that you say it. And I think, I mean, back to what we were saying in the beginning about your book, right? That feeling of anxiety on what's going to happen with it, but that excitement of, I did this. So knowing that both pieces can exist is such an important reminder for me.
I agree. We just have to learn how to hold them together. We tend to get fragmented between emotions. So we at any given point when you ask someone how they're doing, they usually go to one main emotion, right? However, as humans, we never just have one main emotion. We're feeling a bunch of different emotions at any given time. We identify with one that which seems to be greater for us in that moment. But wisdom is knowing that even though I feel very happy right now, there are many things in my life that aren't going the way I like them to go, and so forth, or vice versa. Even though I feel like I'm very miserable at this moment, there are many things that I can find joy in. And if we can hold those components together, I think that's where emotional growth stems from. And that none of these things really mean anything. I mean, they're all very valid. They're there. We acknowledge them, we name them, we feel them, but at the same time, we don't over identify with them, if that makes sense.
It does. And that's something that's been very difficult for me is creating this. I'm feeling very anxious. So I'm just anxious. That's just who I am. Right? Or this idea that I must annoy people, so I'm annoying. Or I am feeling sad and questioning my worth, I am depressed. And then that just becomes an acceptance of how things are always going to be.
And
And
an
then,
identity, right?
yeah, And it makes it very difficult to even begin to explore how to move past those feelings or move through those feelings, learn to cope with them, learn to manage them when it just becomes a piece of this is who I am, this is just how I'm going to be. It's never going to change. So I just have to live this way.
I am a big fan of Rumi's work, Rumi, the Persian poet, because to me, his work is more than just poetry. It's a philosophy for living, actually. He has this particular poem called The Guest House. It's been actually translated really well to the English language. And in it, he talks about how he compares being a human to a guest house. And he says every morning there is a newcomer to this guest house of the human, basically. One morning it's pleasure, one morning it's malice, one morning it's sadness, but you can't identify with it. You have to kind of treat it. Imagine if you had a hotel, even if you had the most annoying guest, you would welcome them in, they would spend the night, and they were leaving the next day, right? It wouldn't make or break you if you had the most amazing person there or a person that you really dislike. The same is true about our emotions. These things just come and go. But the beauty of it, I don't know if this is a blessing or a curse. I mean, it depends how you look at it, but neither will ever stay for good. They're continuously changing. So, how can I over identify with something that's not lasting?
Ah, I like that.
He depicts this so beautifully. So, this is why I say this is more than poetry, it's philosophy. Because if you can just internalize this one aspect, that what you feel at any given point is not you in your entirety, I think your whole life changes. Because you no longer, kind of like to your point, view yourself as I am an anxious person, I am a depressed person. Or even on the opposite realm, I think we always have to have the ability to look at both sides.
Yeah. And just this too shall pass. It's a really true statement. The ebbs and flows of life, a lot of times things feel, for me personally, I can say things feel very permanent. Everything feels so permanent all the time. And when I'm feeling really happy and upbeat and confident, it feels like life's working. I think it's going to last forever. And then it doesn't. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? It's supposed to be. That's supposed to be who I am and how I show up. And then on the other end, that depression, when those depressive episodes happen, this feeling of this is just going to be like this forever. It's never going to get better. And then it leads to ideation. So being able to recognize, I'm going to start writing that down a lot. When an emotion starts to feel like this is who I am, this too shall pass, or this is just don't over identify. It's going to shift and change. And that is the blessing and curse of being human.
Yep. I like to ask myself this question sometimes when I am in a state of mind that I don't necessarily resonate with. I like to say, I wonder how I will feel 5 minutes from now. I wonder how I will feel tomorrow. I wonder how I will feel a week from now or a month from now, right? And then that kind of starts to build up this perspective for me that this state of mind that I am in this moment will not define the rest of my life because chances are even tomorrow I'm going to feel very differently than I do right now.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing you know right now is the present moment. You don't know what's going to happen 5 minutes from now. Your whole life could change in 20 seconds. One email comes through, one phone call, one purchase online, one thing can change everything. So if we live in this moment of this is how it's going to be forever, a lot of times we're just closing ourselves off to that possibility, that hope, that excitement of what's the next moment going to bring.
Yes, I'm very glad you're mentioning that because I think this is a dilemma in our society at the moment. In fact, I wrote the book on this concept. The book is about trauma mainly, something traumatic that happened in my own life, as well as an amalgamation of the relational trauma I've seen in my clients over the past decade or so that I've been doing this. But what really made me kind of focus in on this and want to write about it is things happen to us as we go through life, right? Um, a lot of them are unfortunately not positive events. And as we've been saying, we over identify with them and they become our personality and they become our life script and they become reasons for which I cannot be happy, right? Because I was a victim of this and that. And now this becomes my entire life story. The book is called The Fire That Makes Us because I want people to know that these things aren't necessarily deal breakers in your life. Yes, there is one side of them that are very negative, but if you have survived them, that means this fire has forged you into something that you didn't even know you have this potential. So at this point, it becomes your legacy to kind of integrate this into your core, integrate this into your power, and then share it with the rest of the world.
I love this. When does your book come out?
9-9.
Okay, I'm really excited to order it. It's so true. When we go through something, a lot of times we become a victim. It's like a victim mindset. And we think that this is just who I am. But back to even your point earlier, it's that moment in between, right? Where potential, where greatness, where possibility, it's all born. And we have a lot of control over how we react to it and what we take from it. And it sounds like for you, it turned into a way to help people, a way to make an impact, a way to take that fire within you and give it to others. And that's amazing.
I like to think that we all have this ability. I know I'm in a particular profession that potentially, looks like I have more power in this realm to spread this world and talk about it and kind of educate people in this regard. But I think each and every one of us that choose to work on ourselves and to take the time to go inward and face our demons, every human being that does this adds something to the world because less hurt people in the world make the world a better place to live because it's hurt people that continue to hurt people. Regulated people regulate other people, whether they're aware of it or not, right? So I just want to encourage everyone to do this because first of all, you realize the impact on yourself. It's life changing. You no longer have to continuously live in that state of chaos all the time. I'm not saying life will be beautiful all the time. Life isn't meant to be beautiful all the time. It's okay to have different emotions and experience different things, but your overall sense of being significantly changes and you show up differently for others as well. And I think this is the legacy we all need to leave behind if we want a better world one day.
Absolutely. It really is. And a lot of times we forget that we do have that within us. We have the ability to look within. A lot of times, I know for me, I spent so much time looking outward to tell me who I was and who I was supposed to be. And when we begin to look inward and see, this is what I experienced, but this does not have to define me. And what can I learn from this? What does this mean for me? And being able to take that pain, turn it into action, into purpose, into my tomorrow really makes such a difference. And it changes how I show up in the world because when I'm living in that victim mindset, when I'm feeling angry that why did this happen to me, I don't always bring the same kindness and joy and compassion into my community, into my own world, the way I talk to myself. Everything changes when I am allowing myself to get trapped in this is just why did this happen to me? This is my experience and this is it.
No, I absolutely agree with that statement. I think unless you've experienced it yourself, you don't know how big the impact is. But I think we all have to dare ourselves to try at one point.
We really do. You are so amazing. I really appreciate you making the time to join me today. As we're wrapping up, do you have any advice? Okay, so I'm going to be a little selfish here and be like, I want advice. But as someone who is at that transitional moment where my entire identity up until this point was being a student and learning. And now it's like, where do I fit in outside of that? What piece of advice do you have to begin to explore who I am outside of these expectations of milestones and these ideas of this is what my life was supposed to look like?
First of all, go about it playfully. Don't take life too seriously, right? Sometimes I kind of ask people when they come to me with things that are really weighing on them. I say, listen, you and I having this conversation right now have no guarantee that we're going to be alive 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later. So knowing that, how can we take this process so seriously? But we all do. We all kind of live life as if we're going to be in this another 100 years, right? So always have that playful dynamic in the back of your mind and take the path of least resistance, right? Like when you're wanting to make life decisions, yes, logic is very important. I think we all have to bring logic into what we do and think about it and question things and go about it methodically. But at the same time, trust your intuition, trust your body, trust your nervous system, listen to yourself, see what path feels better to you, position yourself accordingly, and see what you can do to pave that path for yourself.
That is amazing advice. It is so easy to take life so seriously and think that everything is going to be permanent and one small error is going to be the end of everything. That's something that I'm constantly battling in my mind. And that's just such a great reminder. And that path of least resistance, right? I oftentimes am constantly doing things that are setting me up to feel disappointed, right? I'm doing what's more difficult instead of taking the way that feels more natural and true. So I appreciate you and all these reminders that I genuinely needed today. Thank you so much for listening to Normalize the Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. This podcast is an initiative of Inspiring My Generation, focusing on normalizing the conversation, bringing education and awareness to the forefront, and amplifying global voices to spark change and hope. Inspiring My Generation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization on a mission towards suicide prevention through awareness, conversation, education, and support. Connect with us on Instagram at Inspiring My Generation and visit our website inspiringmygeneration.org to learn more about our work and how you can make a difference.